Hello, my name is Clara Maveglia and I founded the Cultural Entrepreneurship Institute in Berlin. Today we are in Helsinki at the Aalto University and my guest is Professor Ilmoniemi. He is Professor for Applied Physics and Neuroscientist. Welcome to our community, Risto. Hello, Risto. Nice to be here and that you took the time for this. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks for the introduction to be in this interview. It's very interesting. So my name is Risto Ilmoniemi. I'm working at Aalto University at the Department of Neuroscience and Biomedical Engineering. My background is in physics. So I have studied solid-state physics and theoretical physics, but after my studies I have worked in neuroscience initially and also now on technology, how to measure how the brain works, what happens in the brain when you think and you process information and so on.
Okay. And you do this in Finland. Is Finland fruitful for this kind of work? We know that, for example, the school system in Finland is so brilliant.
So I think this is a great place for the work that we are doing. The background began already in the 60s when my Ph.D. advisor, Professor Lounasmaa, started the low temperature laboratory. And one of the outcomes of low temperature physics was the squid magnetometer, with which we can measure brain activity non-invasively, just measuring the magnetic field outside the head. And this was developed to high quality here in Finland, and so we have been the leading leading university in MEG technology, and this was also commercialized. So the leading company producing MEG devices, its magnetoencephalography devices, is operating here in Helsinki. So this is a great background. And then this new technology has attracted many neuroscientists. For example, Riitta Hari, Risto Näätänen, and several others that have used the technology for their studies. Also, clinical applications have emerged, and new ideas have been found, and new technologies are still being developed for the future.
Amazing. But if we stay a little more on your history, so what made you the person you are? How did you develop this interest? Is there something in your childhood maybe that was so particular for that?
Yeah, well, I think everything comes from childhood and the background, yes. As a schoolboy, I somehow became interested in how nature works. What is the sort of basic fact behind our normal lives? What is physics? And later on, I became interested in the mind. How does the mind work? And I liked physics and mathematics and puzzles, like recreational puzzles. And certainly physics and also the study of the brain pose great challenges and puzzles. So it's interesting to work on these. And then there are other issues like how is this related to being a human being and society, everything actually. So everything is physics, and everything is understood by the brain. So in a way, we are connected in these studies to everything that we know about. So it's a big field. I can do a small thing, but it's interesting to be in the community of many scientists. Learn about.
So then you planned as a boy, did you plan your career, let's say, or your education, or you were following more your intuition?
Well, this was in high school. I thought I wanted to become a theoretical physicist, and I studied physics, but I noticed that some of my colleagues would be better for theoretical physics. But this was a good background for neuroscience and neurotechnology.
So very special also in your position is that you are an academic person but also an entrepreneur, a very innovative one of the first, let's say. How comes? Can you tell us something about this part of your life?
So initially I worked on how to measure the magnetic fields of the brain. Then in 1985 Barker and others in Sheffield, England, demonstrated that you can also influence the brain by magnetic fields. If you put an electromagnet over the head, a very strong one, it can activate the brain artificially in a safe way. So you can study the brain by stimulating different areas. And so eventually I got funding for developing some new ideas in magnetic stimulations. I was working at the hospital, at the BioMag Laboratory of the Helsinki University Hospital at that time. And my boss liked the idea that we should develop this, and we got funding. And this was very successful. So we built our own devices, and eventually I noticed that we cannot do what I wanted to do with public funding, like grants from the academy and so on. We needed a bigger effort, and the only way to get sufficient funding was to found a company and get private funding. So that's how the NXTM company started in the year 2000. So my goal was to develop the technology for my research group. That was the main motivation. And of course, I mean, if you develop something and you want to give the possibility for others to use it, then you have to multiply the technology. And the only way is to commercialize it, so that everybody who wants in the world can use the technology. So this is what happened. We founded NXTM, and very good people were working there, and we produced the first commercial instrument in about 3 years. In 2003, the first instrument was installed in the University of Wisconsin. Actually, Giulio Tononi was the first user of the commercial device. Not us, because I was working still at the hospital and I was not able to buy from my own company. Of course, conflict of interest. So they did the first beautiful studies in 2005 in Science, but now we have these instruments in more than 100 places at least. Yeah.
And can you describe us the instrument? I've heard the very special thing that is transcranial magnetic stimulation, but navigated so that you can better localize the part of the brain that you're working on.
Right.
Can you describe this for people that are maybe not so inside the matter?
Yeah. Initially, magnetic stimulation was just targeted approximately. But navigated brain stimulation means that you have a map of the brain. Nowadays you can take these MRI images, three-dimensional images of the brain, and so one of the key idea is that we want to be accurate in selecting what we stimulate. It's a computerized technique. The camera of the computer is monitoring the location of the magnet and the head, so we can target stimulation very accurately to select a place where, for example, we can artificially make the thumb move, or the other fingers, or other muscles. And this way we can map the cortex of the brain, the gray matter of the brain, where are different areas. And for example, neurosurgeons now use this technique to locate important areas like the motor cortex or the language areas, so that they can avoid harming these during surgery. This is already in clinical use and government approved in several countries. And so it's great to see also the clinical benefits of this technology. So this was one of the key points, accurate magnetic stimulation. And the other one is that we introduced was that we can now also measure what happens in the brain activity when we stimulate. So in addition to monitoring what happens in the muscles when we stimulate. So if you give a pulse, a muscle moves. But now we can also monitor with EEG. We're looking at the brain waves that are elicited by the stimulation, how they spread in the brain. And therefore we can measure the excitability of the brain and the connectivity, how are the different parts connected. And so there are two new things that we have developed, and they are in scientific use and in clinical use.
This is fantastic. But tell us, I've heard now you plan, or you do it already, you can use it, the stimulation also after a stroke, or for cancer, for when you have tumor. So how, can you tell us about other possibility of using the transcranial stimulation?
So we are not treating tumors.
Okay.
So in tumor patients who are operated, so we can locate the important areas that should not be disturbed by or destroyed by the surgery.
Ah, okay.
So that's for the tumors. But indeed, we can. Many people around the world have used TMS for therapy, for rehabilitation of stroke patients, for example. But it started from depression therapy. Already in the 90s, first experiments were done. In the 90s, if you stimulate the frontal cortex, it's the prefrontal cortex about here, left side of the brain, with rapid rate, 20 pulses per second for many minutes every day. So they reported that people would feel better, recovering from depression. And it's already an approved medical technology in the US and also elsewhere in Europe. And several other attempts to treat the brain by repeated magnetic stimulation have been developed and are under development. Some of them are still at the early stages. You can alleviate pain. Some people have very severe chronic pain, so if you stimulate the proper area, it may reduce the pain, and it looks promising. The treatment of rehabilitation of stroke patients is still at an early stage. Actually, NXTMH is now conducting a multi-center study in the US in 12 hospitals where the motor cortex, actually the healthy hemisphere, is influenced by TMS before the standard rehabilitation, like practicing the muscles and movements. The idea is that if you have a stroke, lack of blood in an area has destroyed part of the cortex, people cannot move the opposite hand. Now if you depress the healthy hemisphere, then they rebalance the sides of the brain, and this will allow the damaged hemisphere to recover. That looks like it, but it's still under testing. So in a year or two we will learn from this multi-center study that how well it really works.
So this, what you just said, is really wonderful. But as usual, there are also always two parts in this technology innovations. And there is also the part that is a bit scaring. So meaning that, so let's talk about enhancement. So if you can enhance your mind or your emotions, is this of course scaring if you take design pills, or nowadays maybe there are people that are exaggerating with that. On the other hand, if you can influence the mind of people, is it possible, nowadays you think about cyborgs, and this can be also scary. So some dictatorship could use this possibility also to try to dominate the world. The world. What do you think about this? Is this plausible, or
if there's a dictatorship, I think the traditional brainwashing is more effective than than magnetic stimulation. But
they will come back to you. Okay.
In a normal society, you can't force people to be stimulated, I think. So it's only for the patients who are, for example, suffer from severe pain. They cannot live with it. They won't help. So I don't think this is for healthy people. Of course, I mean, it would be interesting to learn about how I get to remember better or be smarter. But there are some laboratory experiments where you can have situations where the brain responds quicker if you have pre-activated it artificially. But I think you can do it with other ways as well. You can stimulate your brain also by listening to something, music, or looking at something. So they also stimulate the brain. There are the other way to stimulate the brain, in addition to magnetic stimulation, is transcranial direct current stimulation, or TDCS, where you just put a normal battery and feed weak electric current through the head. And there are claims that you could improve memory, for example, or decision making with these. And there's a lot of, let's say, unethical marketing. These are false claims usually. But these devices are so cheap that people still buy them. So I would be very strongly advising that don't use them, don't market them.
Okay, thank you. As an expert, this is really important. If we focus on what you said, we should maybe first try to define consciousness, because this is what makes human being humans. There are, as you said already, there are so many theories about consciousness, but the newest one is the one by Giulio Tononi that you already mentioned, the one about integrated information, and then there is this other one the new one by Max Tegmark, saying that consciousness is just a state of matter, like an additional one, like gas, liquid, solid, and consciousness. What do you think about this? Can you tell us something from your point of view?
Well, I admire Tononi and Tegmark and several other scientists who have written about consciousness. First of all, there are many definitions of consciousness, like being awake or being asleep. That's one. But I think, and also I think they think about the deep questions of how is it possible to be aware of anything, like your environment or some colors, the qualia, that you can feel things, not only respond like a machine. You have experience. Which, like, for example, pain. It's hard to imagine that a simple machine would experience pain even if you break some part of it. And this is a very deep question. Well, I'd start this way, that in the past, several hundreds or thousands of years ago, people thought that the soul, that it's the mind, is in the heart. Well, this was proven wrong, but of course we know that the heart is necessary for consciousness, because if it stops, you don't seem to be alive. I mean, you don't seem to be conscious anymore. And then some people thought it's breathing. Some languages, at least in Finnish, breathing is roughly the same word as the mind or soul. And then now we know that it's in the brain, really. And Tononi is advocating the idea, which is a good idea, that consciousness arises if there's enough, if the information in different parts of the brain is integrated, that is connected, but not too closely, so that there's some, not random connections, but order and integration of the information. And but also, I think that this is necessary for consciousness, but it's not sufficient to explain consciousness. It's like breathing; it's necessary, but not sufficient for consciousness. TechMag proposes that consciousness is a new state of matter. It's a certain arrangement of the particles of physics, the atoms or subatomic particles. If they are in the right positions and movements, then there is this awareness or consciousness. But I also think there that even if that's true, and it doesn't explain consciousness, it's only necessary for consciousness. Consciousness is a mystery, which is fascinating, because we all feel that we are conscious. And so I'm thinking about that, but I don't, nobody knows what the real answer is. There is something really very deep in this. I don't think TechMag or Tononi have given the answer to the, or maybe even a hint to the real problem.
Ah, okay. So I'm looking forward to reading your theory soon.
That remains to be seen whether I'll be able to do even half as well as they have. So I admire their efforts, but this is still an open question.
Okay. So it would be now really be very, very interesting to hear from you as a natural scientist. Since you mentioned that consciousness is a mystery, you usually hear that related to love. So what are emotions actually from your perspective?
Oh, there are actually in this department Mikko Sams and others who are studying emotions in the brain. I'm not really an expert on that, but certainly it is a phenomenon in the brain. There are areas in the brain that are activated when you have feelings, emotions of different kinds, and because you can measure brain activity with, for example, functional MRI. You can measure changes in brain activity. The blood flow increases in parts which are more active than other parts, and then if you show movies to the subjects, like my colleagues are doing, and there are some emotional parts. So some typical areas in the brain are activated in all the subjects.
Yeah. So passion is also very necessary at work. So if you are passionate at your work, it works better. Yes. Let's say. So what do you like in your position, being a neuroscientist, entrepreneur at the Aalto University in Finland, being yourself? What do you like in that part?
Well, it's interesting. You get to work in these challenging areas and sometimes get something done. But I think even more important in the long run is the environment. I mean, the people, the students, bright students, and great colleagues, and the international community in science. Because I'm not able. I mean, consciousness or the brain are great challenges. I'm not not able to solve this problem myself, but it's great to be in the environment and learn from the others. So and every day, of course, it's the local students and researchers. This is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. It's a very human, adventure to be in this community.
Okay.
That's not only the scientific problems.
Can you tell us something about Aalto? Because this is the Aalto University and is very important for Finland. I mean, a designer, very modern, and but if he gave the name to this university, must be also something more.
Well, Aalto was a great architect and also studied here, so it's appropriate that the university is named Aalto University at the moment. So he is one of the most famous architects in the world and certainly number one in Finland. And well, he designed also the main building and some other buildings in the university. And if we're going to take a look, you will see. Actually, let's have a look after this
Yeah.
of the main building.
Yeah, but you know, when I entered here, the first thing I saw was this sentence, Aalto University, where the art meets technology and business. And this is actually the motto of the Renaissance, Leonardo da Vinci, arte, scienza, impresa. So my question to you now is really, if Leonardo da Vinci, with the possibility at that time, was able to start a movement like the Renaissance, what do you see now today, or what can you imagine today we can reach with the possibility of the new technology, with the interdependence that we have as human beings? Can you tell us, from your perspective as a neuroscientist, what beautiful things are possible?
Right. Well, I think in the past years and decades, or maybe a longer time, science and technology and arts and business have become separated very much. People focus in their own research or work. But I think that it's a great idea to try to combine different disciplines. And this was one of the key ideas in combining 3 universities in Helsinki: the Helsinki University of Technology, the School of Art and Design, and the School of Business to one university. This is the Aalto University. And there were other things also, like how to make it more efficient. But one of the key ideas is that when engineers in the University of Technology develop technology, artists and industrial designers, if they join, we can make technology that is better suited for people, humans, because that's the purpose of the technology, not just a machine that works. It has to be for human beings, and certainly there's expertise among art-oriented creative people to do this better than engineers alone. And then, of course, if we develop something and if we want to benefit the society and other society, the whole world, then it has to be distributed. And we need business to commercialize the technology and spread it all over the world. So this is the idea is good to combine these 3 areas, I think. But if there are still challenges, and we are still gathering everybody here. The other people from the other universities are now moving to the same campus. Some of them have arrived already, and very soon we'll have everybody here.
Ah, so it's a kind of Silicon Valley plus academic side in interaction.
I hope so. Yeah. Yes.
So which role plays the Finnish language? You know, there is not an Indo-European language, if in a linguistic category, and it's very difficult to understand if you are not used to that. Yeah. Is that also kind of challenge for you in Finland?
Well, we know English, but it's a challenge, of course, for foreign students and researchers and professors who come to work here. But this year we have converted all the master's courses into English language, so we teach in English. And of course the PhD programs are all in English language, so I don't think that's a problem.
Okay. You know, nowadays we always work too much, and especially in your area, it's very easy not to say stop, because everything so interesting, and then there are conferences, and students asking for attention. How do you combine your profession and your family life?
Well, first I'd like to say that I sometimes compare myself to journalists who work 8 hours a day in the office. Are they allowed to read in the evening? Other newspapers or books? Of course. They enjoy it, or they can read in the evening. I work in the office maybe 8 or 9 or 10 hours per day. If I'm interested in something, I'm allowed to read interesting, also scientific papers at home. So it's really also a hobby. So if you are passionate, you just want to do what you like.
Yeah.
So then it doesn't feel like too much work. Yeah, there are challenges in combining family life and science. So I don't know how I have succeeded, but when my children were young, I tried to be at home early in the evening and instead go very early in the morning to work, and also during weekends to try to be at home. But sometimes travel disturbs this, so it's sort of annoying sometimes.
You mentioned that you started to have this interest in as a young boy. So would you suggest to young people that are now interested in these areas, are the possibilities when you were a young boy and nowadays different, or what should a young person do actually or study if it's interested in this, if it's curious to understand how the mind works, and what would you suggest to the young people watching this video?
Certainly science for young people is still a great possibility. But there are many different kinds of young people. So each individual has to find his or her own interest, that you really like the thing that you do. That's my advice, and many others advise the same way.
Okay.
But there are great opportunities, I think, even better than before. One of the problems in science is funding. There are many people in the universities, and there tend to be cuts in the government budgets. That's very hard. So you have to be prepared to not so easy life in the academic world. But if you're bright, talented and passionate, you can find your way, I'm sure.
And what about entrepreneurship? So could this be a chance if you're interested in science, so to become an entrepreneur, not to wait for funding, or is it possible to combine this? What do you think?
Well, if you are science-oriented, I would recommend first very serious studies of whatever your area of study is, so that you should become an expert. And then start the company, if you want academic entrepreneurship. So you have to know something very well, I think. Depends on what you do, but you have to be very good at something. So train first. At Aalto University, the students have been very active in the past 7 or 8 years in entrepreneurship. There's this Aalto Entrepreneurship Society, and that started several years ago. It has been very successful. They are organizing now what is called Slush every November, when we may have actually Slush underground here. This event for entrepreneurs. So they attract, I'm not sure exactly, but last year they had 14,000 participants.
Oh, wow.
Several hundred, more than 1,000 companies, startup companies and like, and venture capital investors from all over the world. So it's a really big event, and I think it's about 100 companies that are established on this campus every year nowadays. This was about 0 15 years ago.
Oh.
A few, yes.
Yeah, this is great. So you have been telling us so many fascinating things. Which kind of challenge would you tempt you in the future? Or maybe better, in the present, what would you like? What are your plans for the future?
Well, as I told you, we have developed these two technologies. One is the measurement of the brain activity with MEG, and the other one is stimulating. And now we just got the European grant collaboration with several countries to improve the accuracy of determining brain activity using MEG. So we want to develop the technology to a much higher level. Like the accuracy is one thing, and then the other is magnetic stimulation. We already can do the navigated stimulation, but now we are developing what we call multi-locus TMS, so that we can stimulate many places at the same time, or in rhythms. Like you play the piano, you can play different parts of the brain at the same time. In sequences. And if we learn, and I believe we will learn, somebody will learn more about the dynamics of the brain, how the different parts are orchestrated. It's like the symphony orchestra, many parts. So if we can then stimulate different parts in suitable sequences, we could, in a more effective way, influence this for scientific purposes, and also I believe in rehabilitation of severely sick people, depressed people, people in pain, and many others you can name.
Yeah.
This is the future. So it's going to be a rather elaborate technology, and one of the techniques that we're planning to do is that we measure brain activity at the same time when we stimulate. So that we could have feedback controlled stimulation, so that the stimulation depends on how the brain reacts at the same time, and so the computer would guide the stimulation. This will be maybe 5 to 10 years in the future, but we are starting this kind of thing now.
Okay. So then you can tell us maybe what are you aiming for? Do you have a vision even further than that? Or is this now the furthest that you see, that you can predict?
Well, the understanding of how the brain works, it's scientific adventure. You don't really know what you will find in advance. But of course there's the motivation to understand the brain, to understand also consciousness, and what Tegmark, for example, is saying is that this is connected to the basic fabric of physics, and how is it connected to, let's say, quantum mechanics. I'm very skeptical about the present ideas, but there are some deep mysteries. So maybe we're partially helping in this endeavor. Well, there are many people. I mean, we're just doing one thing. There are many other technologies being developed by other people at the same time. So we are doing our part, and it's interesting to be in this community and trying to figure it out.
Okay, so this is also what you would suggest normal people, I mean not patient, but to continue to interact with other people in order to live the better way, to use the brain the better way, because there are now people selling exercises for the brain if you are aging a bit. So what would you suggest to normal people in order to use the brain the better way?
Yeah, again, I think there are many kinds of people, but I think most people would benefit from other people. Well, one thing that this brings to mind is a new kind of communication with other people via the internet, social media. What I'm worried about is that there's too much critical attitude in the social media against people who belong to another political party, for example, or other ideology or something. Because I believe that almost people are good. So you should try to find their good sides, not the bad things. That's just thing that you brought to my mind.
Okay,
and I think that will also make people feel better. It's if you have a positive attitude. And I have a friend on Facebook whom I have never met who is really advocating this this kind of thinking. I'm in favor of this kind of
so propagate
discussion.
positivity.
One should change the way you try to improve the world, because that's what people usually try to do when they discuss societal problems on the internet. They think that they should suppress the enemy, I mean the other political party, but that's not the right way. You should find the good points on the opposite side.
Oh yeah,
There are good people in all parties, I think.
Yeah,
as I already mentioned.
Yeah, great. This is
that's my philosophy.
Yeah, this is very good coming from you, that you're an expert, and we want to also to improve, to have a good life in a philosophical way.
I don't think this has anything to do with neuroscience directly, but
no, but
I mean I'm skeptical about the possibilities of brain stimulation in changing people, normal people.
So maybe a smile, it's also effective. Just if you smile, they say you get a smile back.
Certainly,
it's more easier,
certainly. And
more
also,
likely.
Also, actually, if you smile, you'll feel better yourself. So this is, I have noticed this, if you're depressed, just smile, then you feel better. Just artificial smile.
It's just automatic.
Because the brain is connected. And if you have something that is positive, then it will affect other parts of the brain. Positive things seem to produce a chain reaction in the brain.
Oh, great! So now we are at the end, nearly the end. So with the last question, what do you think, as you are closer actually to the mystery of consciousness and of life, because consciousness means also life. Don't it?
Sure, this is the only thing we know about life is what is in our consciousness, right? Our consciousness is sort of moving in this world. It's like sort of a cinema. We are spectators, but moving there and influencing their surroundings. So I feel it this way. It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, it's really amazing that exactly at the end we come to this very deep constatation. So, but what would you say it's really important in life in the end?
What is important in life? Well, you should. Some people say that you should enjoy, but and be happy. But I'm not very. Human beings are more ambitious than that. Cats are happy; they just relax and hunt sometimes. But people become happy also by doing something and getting something done, maybe helping other people, and sometimes it's a struggle, especially in science, because you're depressed, nothing works, you have to struggle. But this is really something that gives great content to life, because eventually you may succeed and notice that you have learned something, you have benefited science, even with a small thing. This is very satisfying.
Yeah. So, thank you very much for your time, and have a good life.
Thank you, you too.